The Duke of Ashmore delivered his ultimatum in the library, surrounded by portraits of his ancestors who stared down at me with the same arrogant certainty that radiated from my husband. "If you persist with this absurd divorce action, Catherine, you will regret it," he said, swirling brandy in a crystal glass as if we were discussing the weather rather than the dissolution of our 13-year marriage. "No judge in England will side with a woman over a duke, especially not over ridiculous claims of neglect and incompatibility." I stood by the window, watching rain streak down the glass, and said nothing. Let him believe I was cowed by his threats. Let him underestimate me completely. "Have consulted with the finest barristers in London," he continued. "They all assure me that your case is hopeless. A wife cannot divorce her husband simply because she finds him inattentive or boring. Marriage is not a romantic fairy tale, Catherine. It is a legal contract, and you are bound by it." "You finished?" I asked quietly, not turning from the window. "I am trying to save you from embarrassment. If you withdraw this petition now, I will be generous in our living arrangements. You may have the dower house and a modest allowance, but if you force this to trial, I will ensure you receive nothing. You will be left penniless and alone, dependent on whatever charity your family is willing to provide." I finally turned to face him. Marcus Thornfield, Duke of Ashmore, was 42 years old, handsome in a cold sort of way, with graying temples and the bearing of a man who had never been denied anything in his life. He had married me 13 years ago when I was 23, primarily because my father's shipping fortune provided the cash infusion his estate desperately needed. In return, I had received a title, social standing, and 13 years of being systematically ignored, dismissed, and treated as decorative furniture in my own home. "I will not be withdrawing my petition," I said. "I will see you in court, Marcus." His expression shifted from condescension to anger. "You foolish woman, you have no idea what you are inviting upon yourself. I will destroy you in court. My barristers will eviscerate whatever pathetic case you think you have built. Shall see. You do not even have proper legal representation. I have made inquiries. You have retained some obscure woman barrister that no one has heard of. A female barrister, Catherine. Do you know how ridiculous that makes you look? No judge will take you seriously when you appear represented by women. Again, we shall see." He slammed his glass down on the desk, brandy sloshing over the rim. "You will regret defying me. I promise you that." He stormed from the library, and I returned to looking out the window, my hands trembling slightly now that the confrontation was over. Marcus was right about one thing. I had retained a female barrister, but he was wrong about everything else. Mrs. Helena Winters was not obscure. She was simply selective about which cases she took, and she had assembled a legal team for my divorce that was going to demolish Marcus's assumptions about women and the law. I had first met Helena Winters 6 months ago at a lecture on women's property rights at the London School of Economics. She had been the speaker, a striking woman in her late 40s with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Her lecture had been brilliant, combining legal precedent with passionate advocacy for reform. Afterward, I had approached her. "Mrs. Winters, I am Lady Ashmore. I need to divorce my husband, and I need a barrister who will not be intimidated by his title or his threats." She had studied me for a long moment. "The Duke of Ashmore, I know of him. Old title, depleted fortune, reputation for arrogance. What are your grounds for divorce?" "Incompatibility, neglect, complete absence of any marital partnership. He treats me as a piece of property he acquired and now ignores. That is not technically grounds for divorce under current law." "Do you have evidence of adultery, cruelty, abandonment?" "I have evidence of adultery. 3 affairs over the past 8 years, all with married women. I have been documenting carefully." Helena's expression had shifted to something like approval. "You have been preparing for this." "I have been preparing for 3 years. Since I finally accepted that this marriage would never improve and that I deserved better than to spend the rest of my life being invisible in my own home. Me everything. And I mean everything. Do not hide anything out of embarrassment or a desire to protect the Duke's reputation. If I am to represent you, I need to know exactly what we are working with." Over the next 3 hours, I had told her everything. The marriage arranged by our families, motivated by money rather than affection. Marcus's complete disinterest in me beyond the social requirements of appearing together at necessary events. The separate bedrooms we had maintained for a decade. The affairs he had conducted with barely any attempt at discretion. The way he made every decision about our lives without consulting me, as if I were a child rather than his wife. And most painfully, the way he had slowly eroded my sense of self-worth through constant dismissal and condescension. Not through dramatic cruelty, but through the steady drip of being treated as if my thoughts, feelings, and opinions simply did not matter. "He has never struck you?" Helena had asked. "Never. He is not that sort of cruel. His cruelty is subtler, death by 1,000 small dismissals rather than overt violence. That will make the case more challenging. Judges understand violence. They are less equipped to recognize emotional and psychological harm. We still win, possibly, but it will require a different strategy than a typical divorce case based on physical cruelty or obvious abandonment. We will need to build a comprehensive picture of a marriage that has failed in every meaningful way except the technical legal requirements. We will need testimony from people who have witnessed how he treats you. We will need documentation of his affairs. We will need to demonstrate that this is not a wife being difficult, but a woman seeking to escape a situation that has become untenable. You do that? Helena had smiled then, a fierce expression. I have never taken a case I did not believe I could win. If I agree to represent you, it will be because I believe we can succeed. But I need to be honest with you about something. I do not practice alone. I work with a team of other women barristers and solicitors. We collaborate on difficult cases, particularly those involving women's rights and matrimonial law. If you retain me, you will have an entire team of women representing you. Marcus will mock that. He already has. He believes no judge will take women seriously in a courtroom. Then he is about to receive an education. Some of the finest legal minds in London happen to be women. We simply have to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. But when we are taken seriously, we are formidable. Are you prepared for the scandal of being represented by an all-female legal team? I am prepared for anything that gets me out of this marriage with my dignity and financial security intact. Then let us begin. Over the following months, I had met the other members of Helena's team. There was Miss Evelyn Carter, a solicitor who specialized in financial law and had a gift for tracing money through complex transactions. She would handle documenting Marcus's financial mismanagement and adultery-related expenses. There was Mrs. Patricia Ashford, a barrister with expertise in property law who would argue for my rights to the London townhouse that had been purchased primarily with my dowry. There was Miss Julia Hammond, barely 30 years old but already recognized as one of the sharpest legal researchers in London. She would find precedents to support our case. And there was Mrs. Grace Morrison, a former physician who now worked as a legal consultant on cases involving women's health and psychological well-being. She would provide expert testimony about the impact of emotional neglect on women's mental health. Together, they were formidable, and they were all absolutely committed to winning my case. We spent months preparing. Evelyn traced Marcus's spending and found evidence of tens of thousands of pounds spent on gifts for his various mistresses, on hotel rooms booked under false names, on jewelry that had never appeared on me. She built a financial case that demonstrated both adultery and fiscal irresponsibility. Patricia reviewed the purchase documents for the London townhouse and confirmed that it had been bought with £25,000 from my dowry and only £5,000 from the Ashmore estate. She prepared arguments for why I should retain the property. Julia researched every divorce case in the past 20 years where wives had been granted favorable settlements. She found precedents I had not known existed, cases where judges had recognized women's contributions to marriages and awarded them accordingly. Grace interviewed me extensively about my marriage, documenting the psychological impact of 13 years of being systematically devalued and ignored. She prepared to testify as an expert witness about the very real harm caused by emotional neglect, and Helena coordinated it all, building a comprehensive legal strategy that addressed every possible objection Marcus's team might raise. The divorce petition was filed in January of 1891. Marcus's response was exactly what Helena had predicted: outrage, denial, and absolute certainty that he would prevail. His legal team was led by Sir Richard Pemberton, one of London's most expensive and successful barristers. He had never lost a divorce case where he represented the husband. He was known for his aggressive cross-examination of wives, his ability to make women appear hysterical or vindictive, and his skill at convincing judges that women were simply being difficult. He was also openly contemptuous of women in the legal profession. "This will be entertaining," Helena said when she learned Sir Richard would be opposing us. "He has been dismissing female barristers for 20 years. It will be satisfying to defeat him in open court." "We defeat him?" I asked. "He has never lost." "Has never lost because he has never faced a properly prepared opposition. Most wives in divorce proceedings are poorly represented, emotionally vulnerable, and easily intimidated. You are none of those things. And I am certainly not intimidated by Sir Richard's reputation." Trial was scheduled for May. As the date approached, Marcus became increasingly convinced of his inevitable victory. "Richard assures me this will be over quickly," he told me during one of our few interactions. "Your pathetic team of women will be exposed as the amateurs they are, and you will be left with nothing but regret." I smiled pleasantly. I look forward to the trial. Courtroom was packed when proceedings began. Society was fascinated by the spectacle of a duchess divorcing a duke, and the added novelty of an all-female legal team representing her had created enormous public interest. Justice Edmund Hartwell presided. He was in his late 60s, conservative in reputation, but known for being scrupulously fair in applying the law. Helena had researched him extensively and believed he would at least listen to our arguments rather than dismissing them based on gender. Sir Richard opened with his typical strategy, attacking my character and motivations. "Your Honor, this is a simple case of a woman who has grown bored with her marriage and seeks to enrich herself through divorce. The Duchess has no legitimate grievances. She has lived in luxury for 13 years, wanting for nothing. Her husband has provided her with everything a wife could reasonably expect: a home, social position, financial security. That she finds him insufficiently attentive to her emotional whims is not grounds for divorce. He presented Marcus as a respectable nobleman who had married beneath his station out of financial necessity, but had always treated me with appropriate courtesy. Duke has perhaps not been the most romantic husband, but romance is not a legal requirement of marriage. He has fulfilled his obligations. The Duchess simply wishes to punish him for failing to provide the fairy tale romance she apparently expected." Helena rose to respond, and I saw several people in the gallery lean forward with interest. A woman barrister was still unusual enough to command attention. "Honor, Sir Richard has presented a fairy tale of his own. The fairy tale that providing material comfort is sufficient grounds for a marriage. That a woman should be grateful for a home and an allowance while her husband conducts affairs with multiple other women and treats her as if she barely exists." She presented our case methodically. First, Evelyn's financial evidence. Detailed accounting of tens of thousands of pounds Marcus had spent on his mistresses over 8 years. Hotel bills, jewelry purchases, expensive gifts, all documented and traced to 3 different women. Sir Richard objected repeatedly. "The Duke's financial affairs are his own business. The Duke's adultery is very much the Duchess's business," Helena countered. "And his financial irresponsibility demonstrates unfitness as a husband. He has spent lavishly on mistresses while providing his actual wife with a minimal allowance and constant criticism about household expenses." Then came Patricia's property arguments. She presented the purchase documents for the London townhouse, demonstrating clearly that it had been bought primarily with my money. Duchess brought £25,000 to this marriage as her dowry. That money purchased this property. The Duke contributed only £5,000, yet he now claims the entire townhouse as his property and threatens to evict the Duchess from a home her own money purchased. Sir Richard argued that all property became the husband's upon marriage, regardless of who paid for it. That is the law, yes, Patricia acknowledged. But this court has the discretion to award property to wives in divorce settlements, particularly when that property was purchased primarily with the wife's own funds. I can cite 7 precedents where judges awarded property to divorcing wives under similar circumstances. She cited them all, chapter and verse, legal precedents Julia had uncovered through painstaking research. Then came the testimony about the actual marriage. Helena called servants who had witnessed Marcus's treatment of me over the years. They testified to his constant dismissal of my opinions, his habit of making major household decisions without consulting me, his practice of leaving me alone for weeks at a time while he pursued his own pleasures. Duke treated her grace as if she were a piece of furniture, one longtime housekeeper testified. Present when needed for social occasions, but otherwise ignored completely. I have served in many noble households, and I have never seen a wife treated with such complete indifference. Sir Richard tried to dismiss this as servants' gossip, unreliable and biased. These are people who worked in the Ashmore household for years, Helena responded. They witnessed this marriage daily. Their testimony is not gossip. It is eyewitness evidence of a marriage that failed in every meaningful way. Then came Grace Morrison's expert testimony. She explained, in clear medical and psychological terms, the impact of prolonged emotional neglect on mental health. Emotional abuse is as real and damaging as physical abuse, she testified. The Duchess has endured 13 years of being systematically devalued, dismissed, and treated as if her thoughts and feelings were irrelevant. This has caused documented harm to her mental health and self-worth. No woman should be expected to endure such treatment indefinitely simply because her husband has not struck her. Richard attempted to ridicule this testimony. Are we now to grant divorces because wives feel their husbands do not pay them sufficient attention? Where does this end? Every wife who feels neglected will demand a divorce. Every wife who can document 13 years of systematic emotional abuse and adultery should be able to seek a divorce, Grace responded calmly. That is not the same as mere inattention. Trial lasted 6 days. Sir Richard grew increasingly frustrated as each of his standard tactics failed to undermine our case. He could not make me appear hysterical because Helena had prepared me thoroughly for cross-examination. He could not dismiss the evidence because Evelyn's financial documentation was ironclad. He could not wave away the precedents because Julia had found solid legal foundations for every argument we made. On the 6th day, Helena delivered her closing argument. Honor. The Duke said no judge would side with a woman in a divorce case. He said it with the absolute certainty of a man who has never been held accountable for his actions. He believed that his title, his gender, and his expensive barrister would be sufficient to deny his wife the justice she seeks. This court does not exist to protect powerful men from the consequences of their choices. It exists to apply the law fairly, regardless of title or gender. The evidence in this case is overwhelming. The Duke has committed adultery repeatedly. He has treated his wife with complete indifference for 13 years. He has spent lavishly on mistresses while criticizing his wife's household expenses. He has made her life in their marriage so unbearable that she is willing to face social scandal to escape it. The Duchess is not asking for punishment. She is asking for freedom and fair compensation. She requests the London townhouse that her own dowry purchased. She requests an annual income of £8,000, which is modest given that the Duke spends more than that annually on his extramarital affairs. She requests the return of her personal property and jewelry. These are not unreasonable demands. They are the minimum necessary for her to rebuild her life independently. She paused, looking directly at Justice Hartwell. The Duke said no judge would side with a woman. I am asking you to prove him wrong. I am asking you to examine the evidence fairly and grant the Duchess the divorce and settlement she has more than earned through 13 years of enduring an intolerable marriage. Justice Hartwell recessed to consider his verdict. The wait was agonizing. Helena was confident but cautious. We presented the strongest case possible, she told me during the recess. But we cannot predict how Justice Hartwell will rule. Conservative judges sometimes cannot bring themselves to rule against a duke, regardless of evidence. If he rules against us, can we appeal? We can and will. But appeals are expensive and time-consuming. It would be better to win now. Justice Hartwell returned after 3 hours of deliberation. The courtroom fell silent as he prepared to deliver his verdict. I have reviewed all evidence and testimony presented in this case. This has been one of the most thoroughly documented divorce proceedings I have encountered in my 20 years on the bench. He looked at Marcus. Your Grace, your conduct throughout your marriage has been, frankly, shameful. You have treated your wife as a decorative accessory to be displayed at social events and otherwise ignored. You have conducted multiple affairs with barely any attempt at discretion. You have spent tens of thousands of pounds on mistresses while providing your wife with a minimal allowance. You have demonstrated complete disregard for your marriage vows and your wife's dignity. Marcus's face had gone pale. Duchess has provided overwhelming evidence of adultery, emotional neglect, and a marriage that has failed in every meaningful way. I find these grounds more than sufficient for granting the divorce. I felt Helena's hand squeeze mine briefly. Regarding the settlement, I find the Duchess's requests to be not only reasonable but modest. The London townhouse was purchased primarily with her dowry funds. It is awarded to her. The annual income of £8,000 is appropriate for maintaining herself independently. That amount is granted. All personal property and jewelry belonging to the Duchess is to be returned to her immediately. Justice Hartwell looked directly at me for the first time. Grace, you have endured 13 years in a marriage that provided you material comfort but no respect, partnership, or genuine companionship. You are to be commended for your patience and for the thoroughness of your documentation. You are granted the divorce you seek, along with the settlement terms requested. He banged his gavel. This court is adjourned. Courtroom erupted. Marcus looked thunderstruck. Sir Richard was already gathering his papers with the expression of a man unaccustomed to losing. The newspaper reporters rushed out to file their stories. Helena turned to me with a rare smile. We won. Everything. The divorce, the townhouse, the income, all of it. You won, I corrected. You and your brilliant team. I just provided the evidence. You provided more than evidence. You provided courage. Most women would have accepted a miserable marriage rather than face the scandal of divorce. You chose freedom instead. That took remarkable strength. Other members of our team gathered around, all of them smiling with the satisfaction of a well-earned victory. Richard did not know what hit him, Patricia said with obvious delight. He has spent 20 years bullying women in court. Having a team of women defeat him comprehensively must be quite the blow to his ego. We'll appeal, Evelyn predicted. Men like him do not accept defeat gracefully. Him appeal, Helena said. Justice Hartwell's decision is based on solid evidence and sound legal reasoning. It will stand. She was right. Marcus did appeal, but the appellate court upheld Justice Hartwell's decision in full. The divorce and settlement were final. I moved into my London townhouse as its legal owner. £8,000 annually was more than sufficient for a comfortable independent life. I had my freedom, my financial security, and my dignity. The scandal was enormous, of course. Society was divided between those who admired my courage in divorcing a duke and those who condemned me for publicly humiliating him. But gradually, the gossip faded, replaced by newer scandals. What did not fade was the impact of my case on women's divorce law. Justice Hartwell's decision, with its recognition of emotional abuse as grounds for divorce and its willingness to award significant property to a divorcing wife, became precedent for future cases. Other women began seeking divorces based on emotional cruelty rather than only physical violence or adultery. Other judges began taking women's testimony about psychological harm more seriously, and Helena's all-female legal team gained fame and credibility. They were no longer dismissed as novelties, but recognized as formidable legal practitioners. 10 years after my divorce, I attended a lecture at the London School of Economics on the evolution of women's rights in matrimonial law. Helena was speaking, now recognized as one of the leading experts in the field. Ashmore case was a turning point, she told the audience, not because the Duchess's situation was unique, Many women endure similar treatment in their marriages, but because we were able to document that treatment comprehensively and present it to a judge who was willing to look past title and gender to see evidence. She looked directly at me in the audience. The Duke said no judge would side with a woman. He was wrong. When women are properly represented and the evidence is properly presented, justice is possible. After the lecture, we shared tea in her office, reminiscing about the trial. You know what I remember most? I asked. Not the verdict, though that was wonderful, but the moment during cross-examination when Sir Richard tried his usual tactic of making me seem emotional and irrational. He kept pressing me about my complaints about Marcus's behavior, trying to make me cry or lose my temper. I remember. You were magnificent, absolutely calm and factual. That was your preparation. You made me practice staying composed no matter what he said. You taught me that emotion was not weakness, but that showing emotion in court would be used against me. You learned well. Sir Richard had never encountered a woman who would not break under his particular brand of aggressive questioning. It threw off his entire strategy. Look on his face when Justice Hartwell ruled in our favor. I will treasure that memory forever, Helena laughed. He was absolutely stunned. He genuinely believed we had no chance, that our gender made us fundamentally unserious as legal practitioners. Having us defeat him so thoroughly was the best professional moment of my career. We sipped our tea in comfortable silence. Then Helena said, "You know, your case opened doors for other women barristers. After our victory, we started receiving more clients, more recognition. The idea that women could not be effective in court was harder to maintain after we won such a high-profile case so decisively. Good. That should have been obvious without needing a public demonstration, but I am glad the case helped. It helped more than you know. We have represented dozens of women in divorce proceedings since then, and we cite your case regularly. Justice Hartwell's reasoning about emotional abuse has been adopted by other judges. The precedent you helped establish has changed lives." 15 years after my divorce, I received an invitation to speak at a women's legal symposium about my experience. I was hesitant initially, but Helena encouraged me. Your story matters. Not just what you endured, but how you escaped. Too many women believe they are trapped because their husbands do not hit them. They need to hear that emotional abuse is real, that documentation matters, and that escape is possible. I spoke at the symposium to a room full of law students, practicing barristers, and women seeking legal help. I told them about my marriage, my 3 years of careful documentation, and my decision to assemble an all-female legal team. Duke said no judge would side with a woman, I told them. He said it with absolute certainty because he had never been held accountable in his life. He believed his title and his gender made him untouchable. But law is not supposed to be about who has the most power. It is supposed to be about evidence and justice. My legal team proved that when women are properly represented and the evidence is properly presented, justice is achievable. If you are in a situation similar to what I experienced, document everything. Keep careful records. Seek legal advice from people who take your concerns seriously. Build your case before you leave, because once you leave, that evidence will protect you. Do not let anyone tell you that women cannot be effective advocates. My all-female legal team defeated one of London's most expensive and successful barristers. They did it through preparation, skill, and refusal to be intimidated. They proved that gender is irrelevant to legal competence. Audience gave me a standing ovation, but more importantly, several women approached me afterwards seeking advice about their own situations. I connected them with Helena and her team, knowing they would receive excellent representation. 20 years after my divorce, I sat in my comfortable study in the townhouse that was legally mine, reviewing correspondence from women who had read about my case and sought advice. I answered every letter, providing what guidance I could. Document everything. Seek qualified legal help. Do not accept that your situation is hopeless simply because your husband is powerful. Build your case methodically and find advocates who believe in justice over tradition. Some women followed my advice and successfully escaped abusive marriages. Others were not in positions to leave, but found validation in knowing their experiences were real and recognized. I had rebuilt my life after divorce into something richer than my marriage had ever been. I had genuine friendships based on mutual respect rather than social obligation. I had intellectual pursuits that engaged my mind. I had financial independence that allowed me to support causes I believed in. I also had the satisfaction of knowing I had proven Marcus wrong in the most public way possible. He had said no judge would side with a woman. Justice Hartwell had sided with me, comprehensively and without reservation. He had said women could not be effective legal advocates. My all-female legal team had demolished his defense so thoroughly that it had become precedent for future cases. He had said I would regret divorcing him. I had never regretted it for a single moment. Marcus eventually remarried, to a much younger woman who apparently tolerated his neglect better than I had. I heard through mutual acquaintances that his second marriage was no happier than our first had been. I never remarried. I had no interest in surrendering the independence I had fought so hard to gain. My life as a divorced duchess was far more satisfying than my life as a married one had ever been. 25 years after the divorce that had shocked London society, Helena Winters died at 73, still practicing law until weeks before her death. Her obituary in the Times focused on her groundbreaking work in women's rights and matrimonial law. I attended her funeral, along with dozens of other women she had represented over her career. We were a diverse group, duchesses and shopkeepers, ladies and working women. But we all shared one thing. Helena had helped us escape impossible situations through brilliant legal advocacy. At the reception afterward, I stood with Patricia, Evelyn, and Julia, the surviving members of the team that had won my case. Helena changed the legal landscape for women, Patricia said. She proved that female barristers could be just as effective as men, more effective in many cases because we understood our clients' experiences in ways male barristers often could not. She also taught us to never be intimidated by reputation or title, Evelyn added. Sir Richard Pemberton was supposed to be unbeatable. Helena beat him by being better prepared and more thoroughly committed to justice. Ashmore case was her proudest victory, Julia said, looking at me. Not because of the settlement amount or the publicity, but because it proved her fundamental belief that when women are properly represented, justice is possible. That belief drove her entire career. I thought about Helena as I had first seen her, lecturing passionately about women's property rights, about her fierce determination to take my case despite the odds, about the way she had assembled a team of brilliant women and coordinated them into a legal force that had defeated one of London's most successful barristers. The Duke had said no judge would side with a woman. My all-female legal team had proved otherwise. And in doing so, they had changed not just my life, but the legal landscape for countless women who came after. That legacy, I thought, was worth more than any title or fortune. Justice, when fought for by people who truly believed in it, could overcome even the most entrenched assumptions about power and gender. Helena had known that. She had proved it. And she had taught a generation of women that they were not powerless, even when the law seemed stacked against them. That lesson would endure long after all of us were gone. Did the Duchess and her all-female legal team's victory inspire you? Like this video if you believe skill and preparation matter more than gender. Comment below. Would you have trusted an all-female legal team in the 1890s? What impressed you most about their strategy? Subscribe for more stories of women who shattered expectations and won against impossible odds. Share with anyone who needs to know that being underestimated can become your greatest advantage. Hit that notification bell for more tales of legal brilliance, sisterhood in advocacy, and the power of women supporting women to achieve justice.